They were using commercial airliners. They were loading cocaine on commercial airliners and bringing it in. They were loading it on these Colombian freighters and bringing it in. Eventually, in the mid-1980s, they were using U.S. military aircraft and Salvadoran military aircraft. They had a base in El Salvador called Ilopango, which was a quasi-military, quasi-public base. They had hangars on the military side where customs inspectors couldn't go. These hangars were owned, as the Iran-Contra prosecutor found out, by the National Security Council and by the CIA. They were hangars 4 and 5. And this is, I mean, it's funny when you think about it, but this is all very well documented. One of the things in the CIA report just recently was the idea that there were cables and counter cables and that sort of thing from the CIA in El Salvador to the CIA in Washington, complaining about the activities of a DEA agent in El Salvador who was snooping around on Ilopango because he was investigating rumors that the Contras were dealing drugs out of these 2 hangars. And the CIA cables showed that they contacted the Drug Enforcement Administration and told them to pull this agent off. That they assured them there was nothing illegal going on in these hangars. There was no reason for DEA agents to be snooping around. And when he refused, he was accused of malfeasance and investigated and booted out of El Salvador. He's also written a book called Powder Burns. This fellow is Celerino Castillo, who I found to be a very credible source. And so that's one of the ways the CIA protected this drug operation.
Good people, what's up? What's good, y'all? Welcome back, and thank you guys for tuning in to another episode, another edition of Chillin With Caleb. I am blessed to be your host, Caleb Smith. We are back, y'all, 2026, top of the new year, first episode out. It's happening right now. So, man, thank you just for tuning in, spending time with me, breaking bread, laughing, learning together, all those dope things. And I want you guys to know, man, we got some heavy hitters for you this week, dropping tomorrow and on Friday. So stay tuned, and I can't wait for you guys to see what we got cooking up for this year, man. We are hitting 2026, hitting the ground running. It's nothing to play with. Times are serious, so that means we have to be giving out even more serious information. So understand that we got you guys on our front towards y'all, for the people, our families, our community. So, man, thank you guys. 2026 is going to be our year, another great year, because it takes each and every one of us doing our part. With all that being said, I know you guys have been tuned in and tapped in to the news recently. 2026 started off crazy. President Trump, Venezuela, President Maduro, and just seeing how things have transpired. I know that this has been something and one of the major topics on a global scale, because potentially this can have World War III implications to it. Oil changes, gas pricing, so much, global economy, trades, a coup, government destabilization, all these things happening. Something that I find very interesting, family, is that if you think about it, we've seen things with Patrice Lumumba, Gaddafi, where even CIA shows show you all the time that their goal is to destabilize, start up a coup, and install said leader that they want. So then that leader becomes a puppet and basically feeds them the resources that they want, which then creates a third world country environment if it's not already established. We've seen this happen throughout Haiti, all throughout Africa, where it's this common theme. So I want people to really understand that when we read the news and when we're seeing global news and things like that, we have to truly dissect what's happening, what's transpiring in front of our eyes. I remember with my mom, she had shown me, this might have been like a month, maybe 2 months ago, of Trump and the U.S. airstrike attacks on Colombia, right? On the ships, Colombian ships, right? And you see it all throughout Latin America. And then later you hear, oh, it's about, they were worried about drugs or drug trafficking or this type of trafficking. And I remember in those moments, I would tell my mom, you know, when she would call me about it, or if I would see it on the news, she would see it on the news, is that we got to understand about America is about God. And when I say God as an acronym, not as G.O.D, but that as gun, oil, and drugs. That's your G.O.D. That's your God. And here in America, it is pushed by guns, oil, and drugs. G.O.D. So when we see the same attack, the same approach, who do we see it with, right? We see it with Trump, President Trump, and we see this happening between Venezuela and Colombia right now. In Venezuela, is connecting back to oil. It's connecting back to what? Drugs. And then if you have oil and drugs involved, what else is probably in that predicament? It's guns. So seeing these factors get stirred up, instantly I knew what the US, what this approach was taking over when it comes to back to those times of the 80s, right? When you think about Reaganomics, when you think about the war on drugs, Snowfall is one of the most masterful shows that I think was ever made. John Singleton, shout out to you, brother, for even establishing that. We got the same birthday, Capricorn, January 6th, but that show captivated so much, right? That show made you think about investigative journalists such as the late and great Gary Webb, who exposed the CIA connection and Freeway Rick Ross, and how people think that these dope boys, these kingpins, these queen pins are just individual lone wolf sole actors, not understanding there's an entire operation from the government that backs what they have going on. But then we view these people as, oh, destroying our communities, all these things. And yes, drug dealers should be held accountable. Yes, for sure. But who's also cultivating that environment for them to flourish? Who's looking the other way? Who's helping them create this product, transport this product? And man, I remember people from the 80s and from shows, they would always say, we don't have a passport. So how did this cocaine just find itself over here? We've heard stories about guns being left on railroads and train tracks in predominantly black neighborhoods. We've heard of these stories. We've seen these things. So now it's time for us to start putting two and two together. If it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, most likely it's a duck, right? So this same situation, this same thought process then applies towards what we see that's happening right now. It's the same cycles that's being perpetuated over time, generation by generation, decade by decade. And now in the 2020s, when this time is studied, we see this reverberation, if you will, of white supremacy, of global dominance, of the Department of War, right? When we think about Trump, Hegseth, all these things, it's about global dominance. And that's that battery that pushes white supremacy, is this global dominance concept. And even when it comes down to the most towards guns, oil, and drugs, because that's where it really has its fangs in, is that's what funds everything else. With the Epstein files, right? We see that Trump is trying to do everything else but focus on that, because the Epstein files, what do you think is happening at these parties? The same things that they're trying to put onto Puff is the same things that was happening around the Epsteins of the world, or around the Trumps of the world, of these one percenters who are in these circles. And the first thing that they want when they're having a great time is what? Drugs, right? And then besides drugs, what else do they probably want? Sex workers, prostitution, right? So that's sex trafficking. So this global black market underworld works hand in hand and side by side with what you see in the political realm, with what you see in Senate, what you see in the White House. These people are rubbing shoulders. So that's why I believe as well we see this bleeding into Latin America, into the drug world, because all of that is connected. This is from CBS News. What to know about Maduro's arrest and Trump's Venezuela operation. You can go to cbsnews.com for this article. Former Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro spent the night at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn after a daring overnight U.S. military operation yanked him and his wife from the capital of Caracas over the weekend, or the capital of Caracas, rather, over the weekend, and brought them to New York to face narco-terrorism charges. Let's focus on that, to face narco-terrorism charges. So we're trying to put these charges onto a president of another country. So pausing right there, let's just focus on the high level of entitlement within itself in this interaction, that you feel as though you feel so entitled as President Trump that I'm going to have a special ops team fly in Venezuela, take their president, and bring him to here where we arrest him. This is my point about global dominance. And this is where things get very, very tricky. Now, this is where I want Latin America to understand as well when it comes to voting. For all the Venezuelans out here, Latin Americans, all, right? When we saw voting numbers of a very large number of Latinx people voting for President Trump, right, is that we have seen that most groups think that you're able to assimilate into whiteness. That, hey, as long as I'm not black, I have a chance for upward mobility, right? And we've seen this happen throughout generations to where lightening of the skin, where they intermingle, intermarry. And now we're seeing that a line is being drawn in the sand. That, hey, yes, you can be conservative, you can be all these things, but you're still not us. And what they're showing is on a global scale is that if we could do this to your president, what can we do to you? And I know that the conservative Latinx community might not be, of course, saying this out loud, but I know that there is nervousness that's flowing through right now because you're seeing that they're on this vibe of we're not effing around no more. You see what's going on with ICE. You see what's going on with legislation and all these things, right? Documentation, birthright citizenship, and so much more, where they are intentionally targeting immigration. So for immigrants and people from Latinx backgrounds, communities, understand that you're not white and that you never will be white. So how you move in the political realm directly affects what happens to you. And I know it's not up to any group to save each other. And I know it takes each group saving each other to get to a certain standpoint. But what we have to understand is when you vote for them, you're voting for your own demise. When you vote for them, you're not assimilating into whiteness. And that's something as Black Americans that we've never had that thought because we couldn't do that, but other groups can. And then by you being able to do that, you start to feel a certain level of comfort, of acceptance, upward mobility, social cachet, that I don't have to be like them at the bottom. I'm good, I'm set. Until it starts to hit the fan, then you start to realize I'm not separate, I'm not special. And that's what's going on right now. If this can happen to your president, this can happen to any of you. Understand what's at stake. Maduro and his wife, again, according to CBS News, Maduro and his wife pleaded not guilty and appeared defiant in their initial court appearance, which the deposed leader claiming he is still, quote unquote, president of my country. Top Trump administration officials briefed lawmakers on the Operation Monday, facing largely enthusiastic Republicans and skeptical Democrats. Questions remain about Venezuela's future, including when the country will have elections, whether the Maduro loyalists who still control Venezuela will be able to work with the U.S., and how Mr. Trump's quote-unquote vow to run Venezuela will work. Now, this is where it gets very dicey. Mr. Trump wants oil companies to invest in Venezuela as soon as possible. This sounds like a takeover. Walk in your trap, take over your trap. Like, people really have to understand that we have this issue sometimes in the Black community to where certain people, Meek Mill, right? I saw his comment of how he only wants to do business with white people, right? With white men, or accept business advice from them, right? This is where this line of thinking gets very dangerous, because then you associate whiteness with success, honesty, purity, all these things, not understanding that these same people that you put on a pedestal run their operations just like how a person in the hood off the street corner would, right? So Trump sees that oil, that's where it's at. Landman is one of the top shows I would highly suggest for everybody to watch. From that show, you truly understand the power of the oil industry. I know in this current day and time, we think about electric cars, right? Hybrid cars, vehicles, all these things, and, you know, thinking that things are about to change. But when you really understand how vibrant and integral the oil industry and billions of dollars in fuel and all this is put into our everyday lives, when you think about jet fuel, when you think about cars, trucking industry, the medical industry, they use oil and all these things in fuel. So it impacts so many other things in politics, right? When you think about super PACs, when you think about voting blocks, these are powered politicians, campaigns. These are typically powered by the billion-dollar oil companies. So these oil companies have way more say than what you think they do. People talk about the Rockefellers, Vanderbilts, but where did they make their bones at? Even with the steel with Carnegie, that steel was made for and centered around the oil industry for the railroads, which needed the coals, the fuel, The oil from the John D. Rockefellers, right? For the cars and the vehicles, and then for war, the military. All these things are powered behind and by oil. When we think about the NFL, who's the biggest and most successful owner and franchise that you can think of? The Dallas Cowboys. I'm not talking about wins. I'm talking about entertainment. I'm talking about the money, pizzazz, all these elements. But where did the base of that money come from to purchase that team? Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones made his bones in what? In the oil industry, right? So watching Landman, I saw even how the cartel was involved in the oil industry because they're picking up, drilling oil in Texas, around Mexico. So then the cartel, they get involved. And then you have people from the cartel who want to make their businesses legitimate through the oil industry. So then they start to invest in the oil industry. For rich business owners who might need a loan or two, who do they go to if they can't go to the banks anymore? The cartel. The cartel uses some of their planes. They steal their planes on the show. They steal their trucks. So then you start to realize, man, this entire industry is interconnected with everything. And this is what we're seeing with Trump and Venezuela. This is bigger than what you even can fathom it to be. You might be thinking on a base level of, hey, Trump's just trying to come in, bogart, take over because they're Hispanic. Yes and no. You got to also understand that's part of it. So then he can just appease to that white supremacist base of people who just want to support because he's just being racist. You have that group, that demographic, right? But also another demo that people aren't focused on is the billionaires of the oil companies. They want to make more money, but they want to make more money without having to pay as much, right? So how can we do that? We start taking over these third world countries to compete with the Saudis, right? Because you know that that's the last thing that a Trump, a Elon Musk, that they want to do is have to kiss the ring, bend the knees to the Saudis, especially when you're thinking about Islam versus with them white Christianity. So this kind of even has that old Crusades vibe, right? Crusader vibe. If you think about during the time of the Moors and the Pope, that you have Christendom versus Islam. And we see the same centuries long battle, centuries long war happening again. To where, hey, in the Middle East, over there, they have their oil, right? They have their own ecosystem. We're going to take over a Venezuela. We're going to take over a Colombia. And you already know what's synonymous with Colombia instantly. You think about who and what? Pablo Escobar. You think about cocaine instantly. You don't think that they're not thinking the same thing? That if they can take over a Colombia and set up resorts, U.S.-based resorts, Venezuela, same thing, resorts, and we're taking the oil money. We're taking the drug money, that economy, and now we have access to that. And who's to say with the trafficking rings, right, that those could be interconnected to Colombia's, to the Venezuelas of the world, and they need access to those pipelines openly. There's so much at play that we have to think critically, and we have to understand why else would they be down there? And we keep hearing things about guns, oil, and drugs. And that's what makes you have to take a step back and really understand how they're moving. This is gangsterism 101. They saw a block that's successful. They're tired of having to pay the plug. We're going to move the plug out the way and we're going to take over. So at the top of 2026, y'all, we have got to keep our eyes open. And that's according to CBS News. Now, NBC News, what we know. President Donald Trump said last night that Venezuela would turn over, and this was updated on January 7, 2026, would quote unquote turn over 30 million to 50 million barrels of oil in the U.S. Let me read that one more time. President Donald Trump said last night that Venezuela would turn over 30 million to 50 million barrels of oil to the U.S. days after the country's leader was seized in an extraordinary military operation. Extraordinary, interesting choice of words. The United States seized 2 sanctioned tankers today, including a Russian-flagged oil tanker that was in the Atlantic. The second tanker was in international waters in the Caribbean. Nicolás Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, were injured as U.S. Special Forces burst into the compound where they were hiding. They pleaded not guilty in a New York court on Monday. Residents said there has been an increased presence of government security forces on the streets of Caracas, as well as armed civilian, paramilitaries loyal to the government. So not only are there people out there, they also impacted and made sure that they were infiltrated with paramilitary forces loyal to the government. A recent classified U.S. intelligence assessment determined that top members of the regime, including new acting leader Delcy Rodriguez, were best positioned to lead a stable government if Maduro lost power, sources told NBC News. So we see how they try to implement new leaders, right? Destabilize the government, provide a replacement. Another show, we got to understand that in media, they give us clues. Another show that I highly suggest is Jack Ryan. I think it was Jack Ryan season 2. Jack Ryan worked for the CIA, and in season 2, they were in Venezuela when it got destabilized. And it's crazy how, and I think season 2 might have come out, y'all, around 2021. So it's crazy how they were able to predict these things that were happening. And then we saw in the show, one of the U.S. senators was working with the Venezuelan government behind the scenes. And they were working with drug cartels and all these people. So it was interconnected, because it always is. There's chess that's being played on a higher level, and there's pawns that are being moved around. Speakeasy last night, they said a powerful quote of, all chess pieces have to be moved on the board, right? All chess pieces have to be moved. And this is the time to where Venezuela's name got called up, Colombia and Trump's. Trump is also another piece. When we look at documentaries like Forgotten Country, we know that you have the right-wing Christendom that's pushing Trump, right? The billionaires, the oil companies. When we vote, this is why it's important to own your politician. What do you mean by that? What I mean is this. Trump has to come correct to Elon Musk, Bezos, Zuckerberg, Christian nationalists, oil industry. He has to, even the sex trafficking rings, because these are the people who back him. These are the people who put money into his campaign, and without them, he has no campaign. He has no influence. He's able to get to this influential position, right, to where he can massively win over his base and all these things and market it and all of that, of course. But to even get to that point, it takes money. I saw this feed that it takes up to $5,000 to run against Marjorie Greene Taylor, or to take her position, right? The fee is $5,000 to even run your campaign. $5,000. So out the gate, if you don't have $5,000 liquid, you have to know somebody who has $5,000. And now that person who donates or campaigns for that $5,000 for you, for those 5 racks, they now have a very significant say, because they put that money in your pocket to even put you in position to win. Yeah, you can argue my charisma won, my policies won, I did everything right. Yes, you can say that, but we paid the bills to get you to that position. So for Trump, it's the same thing. Yes, we paid to get you in position, but now you have to pay us. And you pay us back by giving us a favor, because we needed you as president, a powerful position, so we could have powerful moves made on our behalf. And that's what Trump is experiencing right now. U.S. military action is an option to acquire Greenland. Wow, so they are in action to acquire Greenland. The White House says after NATO allies back Denmark's control of the semi-autonomous territory, Trump's threats to take over the strategic territory have fueled mounting European alarm. Wow. So even in this moment too, we have Trump trying to take over Greenland. So again, it's this manifest destiny mindset to where I have to take over. It's God's destiny. I'm backed by God, and I prayed over it. So it has to happen. This has been their main ethos since coming onto these shores in North America. It has been manifest destiny to globally dominate and have this sense of paternalism, to where the world has to look up to us as their sense of morality, as their sense of parenting. It is to us. We are the ones that run this show. And without us and without our supremacy, our high IQ, man and mankind would still be in the caves, in the shadows, in the words of the late Stephen Miller, right? Where I'm paraphrasing, where he had said something similar at Charlie Kirk's funeral, that if man follows through us from our great civilizations of Rome and all these other places, this is who we are. And this is them enacting that ideology in real time, that they must dominate, steal, and take over. F. Brinley Bruden of NBC News dropped a powerful excerpt, powerful quote right here. Jesuit Flores, 83, has a warning for President Donald Trump. Hands off Colombian President Gustavo Petro. This is a sovereign, free country, quote unquote, the retired health ministry worker told NBC News. All Latin America is free. We chose our own leaders. Let's sit with that for a second. We chose our own leaders. Again, I think about Gaddafi, right, in Libya. I think about Patrice Lumumba. I think about all throughout Africa, right? We can go from names and names and names and names. Is divide and conquer, destabilize, move this irritant out the way that will not bend the knee. And we're going to bring in somebody else, offer them riches. But all that you have to do is not take care of your people. All that you have to do is not take care of your people. Let us exploit them. We'll make sure that you're taken care of, right? They're applying old strategies in a time to where people are too aware to pull these things off. So in Venezuela, even if they do pull this off, God forbid, in Colombia, even if they pull this off, people are so aware that you cannot maintain this because now people have nothing else to lose. One of the biggest mistakes that this current government could have done, and the previous regime as well, was giving people nothing to lose. See, one thing that I can argue about previous generations and previous groups is that when them as a people, when they had so much, it was hard to fight, right? So if I can argue about, if you do this, I'll take that good government job. Okay, cool. I'll protest, but only to a certain degree. Or if you keep protesting, I'm going to take that car that you love or that comfortable home that you have. You have this new generation. They don't have homes. They don't have great jobs that pay enough. Some of these people, and most, are working 2 jobs, some 3. So you are now dealing with a group of people that's already disillusioned by America. So they aren't bought into this American dream, this American ideology. I've seen clips of even rampant Trump supporters openly saying that, yeah, our pockets are effed up right now, or the job market is bad. This is bad. So you have people that's not enthused anymore and going through real things who are truly frustrated. So there's no other solution that's offered. So then when you start dealing with immigration, or you start harming black people, or you start harming your own people, medical bills, all these things, like we're seeing a large group of people now for the first time in a long time not even have medical and health insurance because it's too expensive. So now once you start to put your foot further on people's necks, they're already ticked off. They're already on edge. They already have nothing to lose. So in these moments, they want to snap. And what we have to understand is we have reached a pivotal standpoint and pinpoint in American history to where the people are truly tired. You have people who are going to college just to find out that their college degree means absolutely nothing. You have people who have student loan debt, $500,000, right? But then they're having to work a dead-end job. So you have people that are being deteriorated spiritually over time, and they have nothing to lose. And you're further putting your foot onto their necks. And that could lead to a very, very dangerous recipe for chaos happening and so on. And this is something that we must be aware of. So before I close this segment on Venezuela, Maduro, and Trump, Colombia, understand the play. For so long, America has been guns, oil, and drugs. Since its very inception, it's been based on theft. It's a criminal enterprise, in the words of the late Dr. Greg Carr. And that's what we are looking at, a criminal enterprise at play. This is like watching Power in real time, right? To where somebody's trying to become the new plug, become the new kingpin. And we see America coming to a point, this inflection point of hostile takeover for the guns, the oil, and the drugs. And we must always understand, once you see drugs in play, especially in hotbeds such as Colombia, Venezuela, understand what's connected to the drug market. Sex trafficking. What else is connected to that drug market? The oil company. Am I reaching? No, I'm not. Again, Landman, highly advise watching that show. What we have to understand is when these oil tycoons and these oil barons are wildcatting, which means that they're trying to hit certain points, certain rigs, certain spots that burst out gushes of oil, right? But wildcatting, sometimes you can miss to where you're spending millions a day on the drill, the rig, the crewmen, all these things, right? Not producing any income. So then what happens is they start to lose money. The companies fold. Jerry Jones almost had to fold his company before he founded the Dallas Cowboys, and he hit $100 million oil rig. Boom. But before all that happened, he almost folded, shut down. See, people think about Texas and oil money, not understanding all the Jerry Joneses that you see, there's a million more who didn't make it. So what happens when those oil tycoons, those oil barons need some money? Sometimes they go to the cartel for the drug money. Sometimes they go back channels. Sometimes the cartels start buying out the properties for the oil rigs. So everything's intertwined, interconnected. And when you see drugs at play, you see everything else. And that's what makes me think about the Epstein files, that being connected, all these things. And with Trump, he's done a masterful job of making you look right when everything's happening over there to your left. So if they have us looking in this direction, we must look in the opposite direction too. I'm not saying don't try to really get a better grasp of what's going on with what we're seeing in the news. No, I'm not saying that at all. Understand that. Break that information down, dissect it, decipher it, all of that. But also in those moments, we have to take a step back. We have to analyze and say, okay, what else is occurring in these moments? What else is going down? And study that as well. So, God, guns, oil, and drugs are big at play. Americana itself is in love with the oilmen, with the landmen. When we see a Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys deemed as America's team, right? It's those ingredients of Americana that makes people love that. And think about this. Jerry Jones is one of the biggest Trump supporters. Jerry Jones runs the NFL basically, right? And his confidence, that bravado, that arrogance sometimes comes from that oil money, which then he's able to put his hands into the political realm where you see Chris Christie, right, at the games. You see Donald Trump at the games, this politician, that politician, because it's all connected. It's all connected, even into our sports. So we see it, we know it, we're just seeing it all unfold. Watch the show, enjoy the show of seeing what's truly unfolding. We're seeing that in real time, but also understand where do we fit into this picture, into this equation as a people, and how do we insulate and protect ourselves, and also learn from other groups of what's happening to them, how we must protect ourselves from similar things happening, right? So thank y'all, man, for always tuning in. We're going to have a dope segment right after this, so sit tight, stay tuned. Riding along, man, tuning in to this great episode as usual, man. Thank y'all. Part 2 of this Dave Chappelle breakdown, right? We talked about his amazing special on the last episode last week, Unstoppable in Act, of course. It was amazing. And part 2 of this breakdown, one thing that I really wanted to hyper focus on was Chappelle's strong connection, relationship, deep reverence of the late, great Nipsey Hussle I have right behind me. As you guys know, Nip was and is a major inspiration for young brothers, you know, such as myself, right? I was a fan of Nip since late middle school, throughout high school, college, right? Nip died my senior year of college. And I was always inspired, even when he was walking on this plane, right? Everything that he stood for ownership, right? Black mindset, Black empowerment, putting on for your neighborhood, for your people, all money in, right? Put in your money in first, not expecting other people to come and save you, doing for self. His love, admiration for the late, great Malcolm X, such as me, I connected with him on that. I connected with Nip for his love of his people, his friends, his community. I admired those qualities. His woman, for Lauren, his daughter, his son, his sons. So it was so many admirable things. Nip, he was fly, he was cool, he was all the things that I wanted to be, or that I resonated with and saw myself in being when I became his same age, right? Or of that age as a grown man. So watching this special of Chappelle, that hit me. Because I'm like, dang, even Nip impacted Dave Chappelle. On my phone, for people who know me personally, I got all money in. I've always had this, right? All money in as my screensaver. I got a all money in tattoo, right? So I love Nip and what Nip represented even more, right? I love his music, the substance in his music. So seeing how Dave Chappelle was impacted by that in the special, I love that because what people weren't catching, if it went over some of their heads, Chappelle was also highlighting that Nip gave us a blueprint of independence, putting ourselves on. And that's what Chappelle embodied in that. Even with, and although, detractors, they can say, well, it was on Netflix. It was a Netflix special. Sure and fine, but Chappelle is his own entity. Chappelle made sure, even by the title itself, that you saw, hey, I got creative control. You really think Netflix wanted to put the unstoppable hard ER act up there? But no, Chappelle, he made sure it was there, right? When you think about the substance of the conversation of what was being broken down, Dave Chappelle made sure that was him. It felt black. It was black, right? And even for the people, and I saw from part one, on social media that some people said, well, Dave, he has a non-black wife. That's a fair assessment. Yes, that's true. However, though, we have to be careful with not taking the message because of the messenger. And who's to say Dave Chappelle could have his own internal battles with that? That's why he was talking about Jack Johnson. That's why he was talking about Puff in the Mann Act. That, hey, they could potentially even try to turn this on a person like me because of my own things, right? But even if that is the case, can we not say that everything that he said historically was not true? Are we not appreciative of the art that he provided? Because so many times our people, we complain about, hey, there's no substance, or he's not woke enough, or he's not talking about X, Y, and Z. So you have arguably the greatest comedian of our generation walk out there, and of all time, arguably, walk out there onto that stage and left you with something that resonated, that went #1 overall on Netflix over Stranger Things, that had people politically and socially having conversations, deep conversations on, hey, what did you gather from this special? What did this spark in your mind? What did this make you think? What did this make you feel? And see, when we start entering that realm, what that does is we now have real art. And that's why, man, I say that people who are a detractor of the late and great Dave Chappelle or feel as though that, oh, he's not black enough. You have to be very careful with that, because are you black enough? Are you black enough? What are you doing for your people every day? Are you just taking your paycheck, going back home, minding your business? You're no different than the black celebrities that you talk about. But they have all that money. You got some money too. You got a roof over your head. You got a car to drive. You got food on the table. You got clothes on your back. If you got kids, they got clothes. They going to school. So you have enough to sustain yourself. So you have enough to give back. How are you giving back in your own capacity? How are you liberating your people in your own capacity? I'm not saying that you have to be outside being a Fred Hampton. I'm not saying that you have to be, just doing crazy. No. What I'm saying is this. What are you doing within your own capacity to progress your people and the people around you, your immediate community? That's what Nip was doing. That's why I think that placement by Chappelle was so beautiful, because to close on that and then talk about his time in Atlanta with Nip and how he saw so much black success, that he's never seen that much black success. And that shows you something when he's talking about the rich black history of Atlanta, of how T.I. showed him that Martin Luther King lived right down here. And that street that he was talking about was Auburn Avenue. Auburn Avenue, which is the same street that was known as the richest Negro street in the world. That same street that gave you a Martin Luther King Jr., Martin Luther King Sr., Daddy King, that gave you John Wesley Dobbs, grandfather of Maynard Jackson, first black mayor here in Atlanta. Maynard Jackson, who Hartsfield-Jackson Airport is named after. So you have all this history that only if you know, you know. And I do have to brag, personal bias, Atlanta, us as a city, we always find our way in the social lexicon. We always find our way in the discussion. And I think, and it's not just to push personal bias, but when you come to a city that's so black, that's so proud, it's contagious. And Chappelle, I could argue, by being exposed to that, that gave him a different type of attitude, to where he was already in already was, already is this black revolutionary when it comes to his field, his craft. But I think that gave him a different jolt of confidence going into those boardrooms, going into those creative settings of, hey, no, I'm going to talk about this, of I'm going to give this type of history. Because when you see and feel that, it just does something different to you. It gives you a different type of responsibility. And that's the part too that we really have to focus on, is what level of responsibility do we have, not only for ourselves, but for our community and for our people. And once you feel a sense of responsibility, we start to move with that. We start to think about legacy moves. And this special was a legacy move. Dave Chappelle got in his creative bag with this. And he made sure that he left us with some history. He made sure that he left us with some facts. He made sure that he left us with a different type of substance that when you walk away from it, it's going to hit you later. And then you're going to have to revisit that, just like how we did with Sinners. Creatively speaking, right now, our black artists, in my humble opinion, understand that, once again, we are at that inflection point. That if you're not speaking to the times, you will not be remembered. And Chappelle knows by him speaking to the times, he will always be remembered. By him speaking to the times, now when history is told, those certain jokes appear with that history, right? When we think about on the Chappelle show, blouses, just by me saying blouses, right? So I posted a picture on my story of, it was Charlie Murphy and Prince playing basketball, right? And Prince was like standing over him like he had just dunked on him. And I saw in the comments, everybody, they were saying blouses, blouses. That historical moment triggered, dang, that joke, blouses, Prince. That was iconic on the Chappelle show. So now we're pairing history with these jokes. Prior, we think about the same things, right? Him freebasing and it blew up in his face. His comedy special talking about that. Freebasing, you think about the 80s instantly. Delirious, Eddie Murphy, his subject matters. Hearing those jokes push you in that time. Even Kevin Hart, right? You gonna learn today, she ain't got no nipples, all that. You think about LeBron and Shaq, when Bron and Shaq were playing Cleveland Cavs during that time period. So you think about 2010, 2009. So it puts you in that moment. Now let's talk about this. Def Comedy Jam, 90s. That's what you think about, Martin Lawrence, all of them. When we think about Chappelle, Unstoppable Act, instantly, we think about what was going on in 2025. Think about Puff. You think about everything that he's saying about Trump, Charlie Kirk, Dr. King, Nip. He's putting us in a moment of time. And he's showing us this historical timeline of how everything is connected from the past to the present to the future. And what are we going to do with the information that's been provided to us? And let's go back to the very beginning. The very start of the special, I think he was receiving his Mark Twain Prize Award, and he was talking about his mother, that she had always told him this powerful quote that sometimes you have to be the lion or sometimes you have to become the lion rather, to be the lamb that you really are. And that message set the tone and the overall foundation for that special. That in this moment, I'm having to become the lion, the protector, the king, the ruler, to be the true lamb that I am. So I have to fight off evil. I have to fight off colonizers and people that's trying to take over, because I have to protect. And what am I protecting and who am I protecting? That's the question. And I think that that's the question that we then have to ask ourselves on a daily basis, right? What am I fighting for? Who am I protecting? And who is this for? Legacy building. And that's what Chappelle constantly kept hitting at. Talking about Puff, Jack Johnson, ending on Nip. One thing that we do know about Nip, he was always about legacy. Right. The marathon, the journey. And Chappelle ended his journey on that subject matter. Ended his journey talking about T.I., right? And feeling that sense of freedom, independence, and blackness. And that's what we have to search for and find and access and create for ourselves throughout 2026. Freedom, liberation, and access. These are the things that allow us, give us the full flexibility needed to expand ourselves as a community and as a people. When we see a black man such as Dave Chappelle speaking so freely, right? He said, man, it feels so good to be free. And I felt that. And as a black man, we really got to sit with that sentence. Man, it feels good to be free. You know, ironically, we were talking about the Saudis earlier with oil. So then what happens is we see Vegas is on the decline, casinos, all of these things. So now the Saudis are able to attract these black acts. So now, for all we know, the Vegases of the world now have to compete with the Saudis. Now it's a different environment. Don't let them start up the sporting leagues, have we seen with Live Golf, the basketball league that they're trying to get up started. So this all comes back to the oil. Even in Chappelle's skit, it comes back to the oil money. How funny. And we see with Dave in a small town up in Ohio, of him buying the town, reverse gentrification, if you will. And I loved it because he said there's no name for it. It's genius. And he said, and it's fun. So Chappelle showed you at the very beginning that he was about ownership. And he ended with who? With Nip on ownership, on legacy, and how he was heartbroken by Nip's death. And in that moment, Chappelle humanized himself and connected with us because he felt something that we all had felt upon Nip's passing. He felt something that we all felt like we were going through, of that level of frustration, and why did this happen to him, and why somebody of that stature take him out, a man that was doing so much for us, for our people. And I think that that connects back to Chappelle in a sense too, because during that special, Dave Chappelle said that, as we know, Hollywood Bowl, I think he was performing, and that guy tried to come up there and kill him and stab him, all of that. So think about that. That could have happened to Dave Chappelle. When we think about even Martin Luther King being assassinated, that death towards him and his family, even Charlie Kirk, although, you know, we have our feelings and we know Charlie Kirk, he wasn't the best person in the world and we don't really care much, but his family was still affected. People still affected. So it's showing the impact of death towards people who have a voice, right? Chappelle, that's why he said I was shook instantly because, oh boy, I could be next. So it shows the impact of that on people who have a voice. Jack Johnson had a voice. Even Puff had a voice. Fred Hampton, guys, he had a voice. So we got to think, when we see these things happening, what are we doing with our voice? Are we too afraid to speak? Are we too afraid? At the end of Dave Chappelle's masterful special, we saw that FBI file on him closed. And I think, yeah, some people could take it as a joke, but also we could take it as fact. I know I'm being observed. I know I'm being monitored. But what am I doing with this? Am I just going to cower away? Am I just going to throw in the towel and be like, that's it? I'm too afraid. But no, instead, Chappelle, he embraces the moment. And if anything, I want for us as a generation, as a people, to embrace the moment. That yes, it could be challenging when we think about so many things that's stacked against us. But what are we going to do to create a better tomorrow, not only for ourselves, but for our children and their descendants? That's what really sits with us. That's what really stands the overall test of time. So Chappelle, man, he did a masterful job. Nip showing him love and that connection and that love, admiration, reverence that he had for that brother, and vice versa, of them just chopping it up, having a conversation, I think is so beautiful too, because for black people who are black artists, black creatives, each perspective is needed. Dave Chappelle, as one of the top comedians ever, his perspective as a black comedian, rock star in that field, is completely different, unique, but also similar to a Nip. Nip, from his background, his field, could be similar, but also different in the ways of a T.I. But by all of us sitting down and chopping it up, breaking bread, we can all learn from each other and even share information on our negotiation tactics, our deals. How much are you getting paid for that? Put me on with this, and even building together. It's sharing the information and sharing the access. And that's where the power lies in. So to the late, great Dave Chappelle, man, salute, brother. You killed it. Beautiful special. And even if we feel like, well, he can't speak on these things because he has a non-black wife, let's take the message, even if you don't agree with the messenger, because you will lose in life excluding people just because, oh, he's this, he's that, or she's this, she's that. But what are they saying? What are they saying in this moment? And let's be in the moment. And how can I take what they're telling me, apply this information to create a better environment and a better situation for my people as a whole? That's when we start to grow, and that's when we start to truly expand. So, man, thank y'all for always tuning in, always tapping in, showing love. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and understand that the best is yet to come, man. Thank y'all. Much love. And we about to wrap after this segment. Sit tight. Y'all, man, for still being tuned in with your boy, man. Complex just reported in the summer of 2025, a 22-year-old in Wisconsin died after choosing rent over his asthma inhaler, which had spiked from $66 to $539 overnight. Asthma is treatable, but treatments like inhalers can get pretty costly in the U.S. High drug prices and insurance gaps often force impossible choices between basic needs and medicine. This tragedy highlights what happens when healthcare is treated as a luxury instead of a basic human necessity. Like what I was saying, guys, in our previous segments, that the American people have had a foot placed on their neck so hard. And mind you, this was a young white kid. He's had, and America's had, or Americans, we've had the government's foot on our necks for way too long. And now these things have gotten heightened to the point that, unlike our parents' generations, our grandparents' generations, and our great-grandparents, you literally cannot live. You can't live because of inflation. You can't live because of this economy. You can't live because of dangerous legislation that rises up medical bills, medical costs, medical health care. So now you have people that have to choose between food to eat, a roof over their head, or their inhaler, or their medicine. And in that moment, what does that show you? That financial pressures are so high that young adults, middle-aged adults, are at a standpoint that they have to choose between their health care and their bills, their health care and their finances, their pockets. And that should never have to be a decision that has to be made. The Black Panther Party, one thing that I loved is they attack these issues directly by providing the free breakfast program, providing classes, food, groceries, and so much to the community, pure necessities. And I think that that's what we have to get right back to right now during these times. We have to make sure that we are, even if the food banks aren't doing enough, we got to start our own food banks. Even if inhalers are too much right now, we got to start stacking up on inhalers and donating medical tools and things as that, because it's getting to a point that we're going to be losing lives because of finances. We're going to be losing lives because of stress. One thing in particular that really caught my eye is, as well, this young brother was only 22 years old, which means he had just graduated from high school 4 years ago. And within that 4-year time span, a slow developmental process of needs, necessities, and wants started to happen for him within 4 years. And we don't know all the details, but that trauma within those 4 years of being a young adult, he gained certain bad practices, and not bad practices, but trauma responses of, I can sacrifice and put my inhaler to the side as long as I pay my rent real quick. And then he pays his rent just to still end up dead. The things that we stress about, y'all, every single day, does it really matter once life is taken away from us? And I know in those moments, that's the last thing that you want to hear when you're trying to pay for your home, for your car note, medical expenses, for your babies, for the groceries, right? That's the last thing that you want to hear. Because in that moment, you not being able to pay said bills, that's what's stressing you out the most. But slow down and pause in that moment and understand that your life is way more important than all of this. Because even if all of this is taken away from you, you still have breath in your body. And I know that's not what you want to hear all the time. But we got to slow down. Dr. Yamoja, one of my favorite professors at Georgia State University, responsible for starting our African American Studies program back in the 80s, early 90s, man. He had told me, he had said, Caleb, if you think about it, he had told our class, man, when America sneezes, Black America catches the flu. It catches a cold. When America sneezes, Black America catches the flu and a cold. what barely affects white America. So if we see white Americans right now can't afford their medical expenses, what do you think in the hood our people are going through? It's 10 times worse, right? And they've been going through these things. Now it's going to be heightened even more. And it's up to our black upper middle class and our black middle class to mobilize. And yes, even the black middle class is struggling right now. So is the black upper middle class. But even the people that have just a little bit more resources, man, I saw it firsthand with our first annual toy drive this past Christmas, y'all. It's possible. It does not take millions of dollars. We were able to donate to over 500 families throughout the city. From myself, shout out to my guy Bonner, Andres Castro, just local politicians coming together, community organizers, and donating toys. And over 500 families got served toys throughout the city. And we did it in a week, really 2 to 3 days. So if little old me, little old us were able to do that, what could we do if we start working with 100 black men of Atlanta, 100 black women of Atlanta? If you got all the Divine Nine together, if you got, like what people say, the Black Boule, if we actually got them together and started executing, we're having a different conversation. It doesn't take much. It just takes you getting up off of your ass and deciding to make a difference. It's that simple. It's not rocket science. And we got to make a conscientious decision as a group and as a community that we can't lose any more young lives because of senseless stuff such as this of somebody wasn't able to afford their inhaler. We got to make sure that we are investing into the youth, of course, but also that our people have the basic necessities. It's not the 80s anymore, the 90s, the early 2000s, even the 2010s to where most of everybody is okay and taken care of. No, these times are hard for people. We are living in a Great Depression. They aren't going to say it out loud because of who's in office, but we are living in a Great Depression. So how are we pivoting and how are we making certain contingencies to make sure that our people aren't suffering? But it's getting to that point that when you have people choosing between rent and their inhaler and their medicine and their life, we've reached a new low, a different type of low. And you can expect a young generation such as this to believe in America, to believe in this economy and this workforce and this job market when they can't afford between their rent and their inhaler. When their inhaler goes from $69 to $600, $500, $400. When their car note goes up to this, when their commercial rent for starting businesses, because now what's happening is this economy is so bad that you have these young, creative, innovative minds that aren't wanting to start their businesses anymore. Because you got people for commercial leases trying to start at $6,000 a month. White supremacy is playing themselves out of their own position by being so arrogant, of thinking that I will continuously make you bleed and run your pockets dry and you're going to keep feeding me. You're going to keep feeding my system. But it's not happening anymore, and it's a new day. And that's what's frustrating them, because the same old intimidation tactics aren't working anymore. And the power will always be with the people, but the people must understand that power to begin with. And it's time. Because when you have people dying over money, you have people dying over medical expenses and nothing's being done, it's time for us to sit down and to have that conversation about if we see that these people don't care about us, it's time for us to change and turn this thing upside down to make sure that there's people in office, that there's people around us, that there's people in positions of power who do. Because when they don't, this is what happens, and this is what that looks like. And even on a local level, us as a people, we got to understand, we got to get back to voting. The power is in voting. And I'm telling you, as a man who felt disillusioned by my vote, until it was time for me to start doing big business. And then I started realizing, oh, I need to know who this zoning manager is. I need to know who my alderman is. I need to know who my city councilman is, because then they pass these laws for my business to have certain noise ordinance, max capacity rules, infrastructure, architecture. So even to start your black-owned business, you got to know who's who. And you know who's who through your money and through your voting power. So when we say, oh, I'm not voting, you got to understand in that moment, basically what you're saying is, I'm not important enough. That's what you're saying. Because you got to understand that when you got things that you're building and when you're legacy building, you got to have powerful friends and you got to know powerful people. But first, you got to put those like-minded people in those positions to play ball. And that's what we got to start doing throughout 2026, throughout the primaries. I'm not saying settle with your candidate, no, but we got to become more politically astute, politically aware, because sitting on the sidelines, you get played too, right? Think about all the fans, all the fanatics at the sports games, things like that, right? They show up, they watch, and they go home. At the trophy ceremony, all of that, you don't get a ring, you don't get a trophy, you don't get none of that because you were sitting on the sidelines. So you get nothing out of the deal because you played it safe. Let's play it big. Let's start identifying young political scientists at a young age who want to run for office, who want to be involved in that sector, or current people as well. But it takes the effort, and this is the year of effort. We can talk, we can strategize, but this is the year of doing. This is the year of effort and responsibility. We have to take responsibility. Have to take responsibility, and we have to understand that this is our time to shine. We are the new adults. We are the new parents. We are the new uncles, aunties. So we got to take that on. And if we want to see that change, we have to show them what that change is supposed to look like and set that new standard. That's on us. But our youth, young people dying over inhaler pricing because they have to pay their rents because we got privatized rent. We got slumlords, overpriced rent because they're trying to get you out of home ownership. Because with rent, I could change that price how I want to. It's sporadic, new ownership, new this, new that. Mortgage rates, I'm going to make that go up so I can push you out of your home. Property taxes, make that go up. I'm going to gentrify the areas, keep you destabilized, which then connects back to Venezuela. They want to destabilize that government because once I destabilize you, I took your foundation out and now you're dependent upon me. And they want you to stay dependent upon them. So when it comes to our voting, when it comes to our money, our black dollars, our education, everything, it all, even our churches, spirituality, everything goes hand in hand. You saw that in Sinners. We're seeing that right now in real time. Everything goes hand in hand. The spiritual sector, politics, business, money, communal, everything goes hand in hand to build what we need to properly sustain ourselves and to thrive. But what are you going to do about it? Are we going to keep talking? Are we going to keep complaining? Are we going to keep hating on the people that's doing and saying what they need to be doing? Or are we going to help those who need to be helped? And are we going to help ourselves? It's the year of responsibility. To whom much is given, as you guys know, much is required. So much is required of us. Much is required. Much is required. God gave you this beautiful melanin, right? God gave you breath in your body. Function. What are we going to do within our given capacities to create and sustain a better reality for our people and our children and our children's descendants? That's what we have to always ask ourselves. And legacy build, which is what Dave Chappelle left us with about Nip. And all of this connects. All of this connects. So understand that, y'all. But man, thank you guys for always tuning in, tapping in, showing love. We were blessed to have another dope classic episode as usual. I appreciate you, family. Make sure to share this content, comment, show love. And if you guys have any questions, if you guys want any topics to be talked about, let us know. Join our membership. We got a lot of perks on the way. And I just want to say thank you so much. 2026, we about to go crazy. We're almost at 50K subscribers because of dope people such as yourself tapping in. Our goal is to hit 100K this year. I think it's possible. So tap in with us. Enjoy this journey. And know that the best is yet to come. We got more Chillin' with Caleb's dropping weekly. So it's about to be a vibe. But thank y'all. And I love you guys. Until next time, fam. Peace.